As we get closer to 2024, polling data is going to loom larger and larger as the political landscape comes into view. And I assure you that at the White House today, everyone was talking about the latest ABC News Washington Post poll. It was the worst ever for President Biden as he just announced his bid for re-election. Joining us right now to break this down is Tom Bevan, president of Real Clear Politics, clearinghouse of polling data, including, of course, the all-important Real Clear Politics average of polls. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Larry.
I want to get into the averages in a moment because this Washington Post poll really does stick out, and that's one of the reasons why you guys do the average, so one outlier doesn't completely skew things. But generally speaking, you got to think that the White House was not thrilled with what they saw in this Washington Post poll yesterday.
No, definitely not. And you're right. We try not to make too much of any one poll. That being said, polls will have consequences. I mean, this generated a huge negative news cycle for Biden, reinforced a lot of the weaknesses of his candidacy, and we'll have to wait and see whether this data is confirmed by forthcoming polls.
Yeah.
But it certainly got the attention of the White House, and it created, as I mentioned, a real sort of negative cycle for Biden in the news.
It's also the first major poll since his announcement, such as it was. It was mostly just a video announcement and then a couple of appearances, not a big rally as we often see when people announce their election plans. But you would think, I'm sure that the Biden team was hoping to get some kind of bounce. What was fascinating to me was the 49 to 42 numbers there. Trump versus Biden. Trump beats him by 7 points, and Trump is just shy of the 50% mark at this point, considering the negative attention President Trump has gotten in this same time frame.
Yeah, again, for Trump, who's seen as, there are a lot of questions on the Republican side about his electability and whether he can beat Biden after losing to him the first time around, whether he's too toxic for moderates, for independents, suburban women, and the like. This was an excellent result, not only for him, but for DeSantis. And so I think it gave Republicans some hope that things may not be as dire as they were thinking it might be. Again, a lot of these same numbers, though, you look at Biden's job approval rating, you look at the state of the economy, those were very much in play in 2022. And Biden and the Democrats were not held responsible for that, for those circumstances. So
yeah.
Perhaps it'll be a rerun in that same vein.
The approval rating for President Biden dips down to 36%. That's the new low, I believe, for President Biden. However, the Democrats don't seem to be real keen on opening themselves up to a primary process here, despite the fact that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is currently polling around 19% without doing much.
Yeah, it is interesting, and that shows the softness in Biden's numbers. Look, Democrats like Biden. They support Biden. But at the same time, majorities of Democrats did not want to see him run for re-election. That was very clear in the data. And so I think that's manifesting itself not only with the 20% that RFK Jr. is getting, but the 10% that Marianne Williamson is getting. And so it shows the weakness. And obviously, the Democrats have moved, the Democratic National Committee have moved to try and protect Biden, shifting the first primary state to South Carolina and trying to forego any debates, having him on stage against any Democrats. And so far, they've been successful. So unless somehow RFK, continues to grow and Biden gets, down to 50% or below, I suspect things will sort of stay the course for the Democrats.
4 years ago, one of the big rationales for President Biden to get the nomination was that he was the guy who could beat Donald Trump. The fact that both Trump and DeSantis now are polling well ahead, over 5 points better, again, in this poll in particular, does that also undermine the rationale for 4 more years from President Biden?
It might. Democrats may end up with a case of buyer's remorse if those numbers bear out. Now, look, in our average, Donald Trump leads Joe Biden nationally by, I think, 1 percentage point. DeSantis is doing a little bit better than that, but you got to look at. It's not a national election. It is going to be all the same states that were featured in 2016 and 2020 and 2022, and the question is, how competitive Joe Biden's going to be in those states. But again, all of the numbers surrounding him continue to be soft. The direction of the country, his approval rating specifically on economic issues and inflation, which is, again, the number one concern of voters and has been for some time. So he's fighting sort of an uphill battle right now.
I was looking at the numbers in the Republican primary. This is a really tough one because, of course, the primary is won state by state by state. It's not a national election. So you look at these national polls for preference between Trump and DeSantis, and it doesn't really tell you how the primary is actually won or how the nomination is won. That said, it's striking. Trump is now winning by 30 points on the RCP average. And what it's really reflecting, Tom Bevan, is a huge spike for Donald Trump, in favor of Donald Trump, after he got indicted by Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. That's a stunning development.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's lead over DeSantis in the first, 10, 12 weeks of the year was really stable, right around 14, 15%. And as you mentioned, as soon as Trump was indicted, it created a rally effect for him, and where he effectively doubled his lead up to 28, 29, now around 30 points over DeSantis. DeSantis has had trouble gaining traction, even though, and I know he's not an announced candidate officially, but he's been effectively campaigning like one. With this book release, he's given speeches all across the country. He's traveled abroad. He's gotten a lot of media attention as a de facto presidential candidate, and it has not really moved the needle for him thus far. So we'll have to see, whether Trump's lead is sustainable. There's still there's some Trump fatigue out there among the Republican electorate. I think the problem for Republicans is they've got about 28% of folks say they will vote only for Trump and for no one else. And there's about another 28 or 30% who say they will never vote for Trump and only vote for someone else. And so that's a real unique dynamic in the Republican primary as we watch that play out.
Yeah, I'll say. And you're right. He's not an announced candidate, but I think it's noteworthy, Tom Bevan, that Donald Trump has treated him like he's an announced candidate. Donald Trump has been going after him and throwing a lot of insults and challenges to Ron DeSantis's record. And has that had an effect? Is that one of the reasons also why Ron DeSantis is not closer than he was before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this stuff is hard to measure. And certainly some of the attacks that Trump has thrown at DeSantis, that he's a terrible governor, Florida's a terrible place to live, he mishandled COVID, simply don't square with the facts and don't even square with Donald Trump's previous comments about Ron
Right.
DeSantis. So I'm not sure, obviously the folks who are big Trump supporters will, buy into that, but it's hard to tell how much that's affecting the other folks that are out there, the ones who are open to voting for someone else. It's just at this point, and DeSantis hasn't really, he's engaged a little bit on his own, but this hasn't been a situation where they've been really, standing side by side on a debate stage, going back and forth, which I think will be a real key moment if and when Ron DeSantis decides to get in this race.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching that, and we'll see if that does make a difference. The debates are already set for the Republican side, at least the first few, and they're coming up in just a couple of months. And as of now, no debates for the Democrats, although one wonders if that will continue if polls like this trend in this negative direction. Tom Bevan, we'll have to leave it there, but it's always insightful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Larry.
He is the president of Real Clear Politics, and if you're a political junkie, well, that's the only place you got to go these days. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.